Jesse Shuja teaches English and history at a Montessori school in Sweden. He's also the founder of the PlantStock YouTube channel, which focuses on stocks connected to companies that promote plant-based products. Jesse analyzes the stocks, covers any news about the companies, and provides investment strategies and philosophies. Jesse's not a financial advisor, although he has been looking at the plant-based movement through a research lens for almost 20 years. So Jesse and I would both like to emphasize that none of this information shared in this program should be taken as financial advice. It's just information, and it's really important that everyone do their own research and make their own choices. And thank you for taking this time today, Jesse.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so the story of becoming vegan, always my favorite story. How did that happen for you?
Well, it's almost, I would say, 9 to 10 years ago now. And it started, well, I became a vegetarian when I was 25. So that's soon 20 years ago. And I remember I read a lot of books about Taoism and Buddhism. And I'd always kind of been part of my life anyhow. I've never really been into, when it comes to eating meat, never really been interested. The only thing I did was the kind of like, I guess the coward's way, that minced meat, so it didn't like mimic meat or look like meat. So that would be more simple, but I didn't even like chicken or fish. So it would have to be minced meat. But yeah, I had some bad experience growing up. My mom, she was very young when she had me. So there was always, she always had like, she was very stressed. She worked a lot and studied and then had to take care of me alone. So I still remember when I was like 4 or 5 years old, her minced meat, like her spaghetti bolognese, that would be like a pinkish color kind of thing on the meat. So, and that kind of always got stuck with me. And so when I was 25, I felt like, you know, I really love animals. I care about them. It feels like the ethical thing to do, right? So I made that choice. I felt like this whole Taoistic way of being, you know, being one with nature and respecting all life on the planet. No one is more worth anyone else. So I made that choice then. And I was that for about 10 and a half years, even though I dabbled a little about veganism and read more about it the last couple of years. And I always felt kind of not at ease with cheese in itself, because I'm not sure how you say that word in English, but there's like a substance in the calf's stomach that you normally need to be able to create cheese. I think it's different in North America to some extent, in the US anyways, but in Europe, we still use old traditions to make cheese. So you kind of like have to kill a baby calf to get this substance that you scratch out of it, and then put that in with the rest of the milk to create this kind of cheese sensation.
Oh, so I didn't know that.
No, so already then I started realizing that I was trying to find cheese that were made in a different way, so I could actually feel better about that. But then, as we know, I learned more and more about what happens to calves and the cow, cow mama when it's born. So it's basically, as we know, yeah, it's a constant raping of the cow for 5 years, if not longer, and they could actually live way longer than 5 years. But then the cow is slaughtered after that, and it's the same with the calf. Either they're going to be groomed to become a dairy cow, or they'll be slaughtered too. So the more I thought about it, didn't make sense. And then I watched, one of my all-time favorite documentaries, which is Forks Over Knives. And that got me thinking also about health, because I've always been very interested in living a very long life and as healthy as possible, considering all the onslaught of diseases out there, cancers and diabetes, arthritis, heart diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and started to understand that it all comes from the same point, right? Like humans were not put here, or animals were not put here to just have all these diseases in this unnatural way. So I just felt like, okay, this makes sense. And I started to with my research background in history, I just started to read about everything. No, so I just felt that when I used that background to basically check everything I could research-wise, reading a lot of Dr. Greger's research and what he's been talking about for years, and China study, and also what's his name now? The one who Dr. Garth Davis, I think his name is.
Okay. Yeah.
I think Proteinaholic. I'm not sure if you've
Oh.
read. So basically, just reading meta-analysis from all around the world, and it all points to the same fact. It's quite simple from a research point of view. There's no confusion that maybe some dairy is, healthy for you, and maybe meat could be healthy for you depending on the meat, or chicken is better. It's all part of our myth, right? So I just felt that okay, I'm going to follow this vegan lifestyle because it already, made sense to me. So also knowing that it's good for the animals and it's good for my health and other people's health. And then the sustainability thing became even clearer about 10 years ago. And especially since Cowspiracy came out, that made it even more clear regarding what the UN has been talking about since 2006, right? So yeah, it just resonated with me. And so here we are, basically.
Cool. Yeah, no looking back, right? There's nothing but forward. And so what's also happened as the vegan movement has arisen is that now there are actually plant-based companies to invest in for people who are interested in this, which actually it's really a form of gambling, I think, really is a one way to think about it. But I think more and more people are becoming vegan, and for all these reasons and more. And now COVID, we know what it's like to live with these zoonotic diseases, and we don't need to, we don't have to. So
And I think that's really important also, that I do think that that's for, in the long run, this is actually benefiting animals, I think, because like you said, pandemics, one of the biggest reasons is animal husbandry, right? And most people don't seem to realize, that in when we had the Spanish, what do you call it in English? The Spanish disease, right? Or the Spanish
flu, they call it the Spanish flu, but I think that's kind of racist. It's like calling COVID the Chinese flu, right?
Yeah.
It's the 1918, the flu epidemic. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't actually start in Spain either.
That's right.
But it did. But the events started to become more updated, and people covered it a lot more when it was in Spain. So that's why they got that word from there. Yeah, we really like to always blame specific people.
Somebody's at fault. That's right. It's not me. It's somebody else's fault. Yeah.
And basically, even the common cold, I'm sure you know that already, is from horses. I think it started around something like 5 to 10,000 years ago. That the common cold, we use the word common today, but it wasn't something natural among humans. It was something that was actually transferred from horses when we started using them more and more in our everyday lives.
And something, one of them is from camels as well. One of the Mars or Sirs or something like that. Sirs or Mars.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, and that's also something Dr. Greger talks about a lot. He's written like this kind of huge book about how to survive a pandemic.
Right. And, so is this information that you're getting from your media in Sweden? I'm wondering, Jesse, do they talk about this? Because they're not talking about it here.
Regarding pandemics?
The source, yeah. There's a lot of talk about how the disease management and wearing masks and the vaccine, but there's not sort of this message that we really need to move away from doing this animal agriculture thing. No,
some people every now and then mention it, but they really go quickly away from it. And basically, I think the whole message in Sweden, when it started in March in Sweden, like big time then, and then the whole coverage was basically on the wet markets in China. And we had some issues in Sweden too, not as much, I think, as in North America, but regarding the way people looked at people from Asia. because like it's kind of their fault, or people got nervous when there are Asians around you, which is ludicrous, of course. And I kind of feel like, yeah, there seems to be some correlation with the wet markets, but that's just in this case. There are so many other diseases that's been, like the Spanish flu was probably related to, I think, pig husbandry, so hogs. And we've had several times when it comes to cows, like mad cow disease. So this is just one of the things, right?
Right.
So,
and I've heard that pigs are particularly good for the variants, because now we know that the virus goes from humans into animals, like with the mink in was it Finland that did, or Denmark, that did the cull of all their mink, and for some reason sorry,
I think they actually slaughter like 20 million.
How horrifying. I mean, it shut down the industry though, so I guess that's a good thing. So in British Columbia, where I live, they've just reopened all the mink farms. So go figure. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here, but apparently, so that it went from human to mink, it sort of rearranged itself and then jumped back. That's where the variants are coming from. But apparently pigs are perfect for this. Because they're something to do with their biological system. So there's just no good reason to keep doing this to animals. And it seems like the whole message, the Taoist, Buddhist message is, stop doing this. The energy is coming back at us, right? And yeah, so plant-based investments seems like, I've tend towards anti-capitalism. Like, I'm not a fan of big corporations, getting all the tax breaks and not contributing to society. But at the same time, now there's these young startup plant-based companies, and you offer a whole YouTube channel just analyzing these. So how did you get started with that then?
Well, it's funny that you talk about anti-capitalist, and for years I've had this. I'm not sure if we should call it issue, but for me, I'm like a traditional academic. I've always been like academia and science and knowledge is among, besides love, right? It's among the most important things, trying to improve ourselves as a human, as a species. But money has always been something that I found kind of like bad or dirty, and I felt like I don't want to be connected to it. And it's bad. I guess I'm building on the American stereotype about Swedish people that we're all communists or socialists, but
hooray!
But this is actually not true in Sweden. We have some form of socialism that's quite strong here, but it's not the way people think. We're very getting more and more towards the right wing here in Sweden. So whether one likes that or not, but so I had those values, and as with my background in history, we talk about something called historian materialism. So that's a huge part of history, which kind of looks at where did it all go wrong? Why are there? Because postmodernism, I'm not sure if you heard about that.
Postcolonialism. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically looking at how the West have treated other countries like India, several African countries, slavery, colonization, and all. And from a historic point of view, one of the reasons is capitalism, right? They're not everyone who's going to agree with that. And obviously, that's just part of the truth. Like so many things, nothing is black and white. But since that's been part of my kind of academic background, I became even more like, capitalism, that's bad, right? And then the older I got, I just started thinking like, because somehow I wish we were more in a resource-based society where we weren't part of any kind of like economy, that we wouldn't need money, that if we just knew how to divide the resources amongst the whole planet, I'm pretty sure if you look at different research there, we would all be doing pretty well by now. We would have an okay standard, which would be for all people. But we're not there yet. So as I've grown older, and it might be that I've lost my philosophies somehow, maybe. But I just started thinking more that maybe can I somehow apply some of the realities that we live in to fit in with something good. And that's why I think, I'm not sure, do you know who Shamat Palihapitiya is?
No, I do not.
Well, I think he's originally from Sri Lanka, but he's lived in Canada for most of his life.
Oh.
It could be Vancouver, I'm not sure. But he's one of the most famous venture capitalists out there right now. And he has something called social capitalism, which I really feel attracted to. It's basically that it is a form of capitalism, but where you sponsor companies or invest in companies that actually does good for the planet. So, so far what I've seen, he mainly talks about sustainability from, kind of like Tesla. He was one of the really large investors in Tesla from the beginning, which made him a lot of money. And now he's talking about the health system. He's investing in companies that are trying to make it better for the everyday Joe and Jane, so that everyone can afford a good health system, basically. So it's really famous for that. So I kind of believe in that. Like, let's try to use capitalism for supporting companies that are actually trying to not only make money, but actually supporting the planet, right? So that's basically what I'm into. That's what I feel good about. So if I can make money, right? If you can invest in companies that are trying to support, not only sustainability, but also animal welfare and food that is actually better and healthier for humans, at least from the research that I've looked at, then I can feel good about that and sleep at night. That's basically my whole philosophy. So if I can get wealthier in that way, I'm not into this because I want to be super rich or anything. Doesn't correlate with my beliefs anyhow. But I want to be able to maybe have more freedom in my life to work on other aspects than just having to go from an 8 to 5 job, basically.
Well, there comes a point in life when we think about retirement as well, right? And what's that going to look like? And we're so healthy, we're going to live to be 150. So we got to plan for that.
Exactly.
So what are some of your favorite vegan companies, Jesse?
Well, I think most of them who follow me knows that by now. Is the Very Good Food company.
Yay!
Yeah, exactly. Definitely one of the ones that I started looking into at first. Already, I think it was in June, just after their IPO. I was so excited about them because I had already invested in Beyond Meat a half a year before. But that was basically the only company you could invest in that was plant-based and vegan. And then I think there were other smaller companies that I hadn't heard about that was starting around the same area during last summer. But then I started looking into the Very Good Butchers more and more, or the Very Good Food Company, which the overall company is called. They made a lot of sense. And I started to follow their journey. And the more I read up on them, the more I believed in them. I love their vision, and kind of like the Mitchell Scott, when he talked, the CEO, when he talks about something, he comes up with some visions and ideas. I looked at some older interviews with him, and he talked about those ideas. He's not only talking; he's a man, that actually walks the talk, so to say. So, or talks the walk, walks the talk, I guess it is. And I respect that a lot. For me, it's important that the company has a good and strong CEO with a clear vision, and he does seem to have that. So, and considering this whole industry, the plant-based industry, I really see that it's in the right time and place. So, and especially in Vancouver.
Well, Vancouver Island, to be specific.
Thank you, Brian.
But I've heard that the Vancouver, this region, they're calling it, I don't know where I heard this, but somebody's calling it the Silicon Valley of plant-based foods. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
It seems like, yeah. So very good food company. They're local. They grew from one of the Gulf Islands here. It was a very grassroots thing, and they're growing exponentially. So what I've learned is that, you got to find a company that you believe in, that has good values, that isn't going to sell out, hopefully, and start, promoting animal products, which I don't think they're going to do that. But then on the other hand, you have this big stock market monster that does its own thing, that influences what happens to the company stock price, right? What should, like, so people who are absolute beginners, what should they know about the stock market?
I think, like most things, you really need to read up on everything. But I don't think always, my experience anyways, I think that's important to say. I'm not, like you said, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not in any ways an expert. I'm just doing like most people. I'm reading some books, some papers and articles. And then I've seen a lot of YouTube clips with people that I respect on YouTube who, and I'm trying to use their philosophies. And Shamat, Shamat is one of them. But also, I'm not sure if you've heard about Dave Lee on investing. He's probably one of the best, I would say, he's not a financial advisor, but some of the best philosophers out there when it comes to, investing and his investing theories. And if it resonates with you, right, and when it comes to looking for a company that you believe in, that's important, right? You have to understand the industry. So if you're like me, I'm not only invested in the plant-based sector, but it's where I'm focusing most of my attention on, no question about it. But you have to understand the industry sector. And I don't think you can understand a sector just by being an expert on stocks or just by being an expert on investing. So, and that's why I feel like I might have an advantage to some extent, because there's plenty of financial advisors and YouTubers and people who are into stocks out there who are probably a lot better than me. There's no question about that. But it's not certain that will help them if they don't understand an industry sector, because I've noticed there are plenty of people out there who talks a lot of smack about the very good food company and Beyond Meat and other plant stocks out there. They don't really believe in it. And then again, there's plenty of others who do. But I think one of the reasons is that either they haven't lived that life at all, or they're just blind to what's going on around them. Because for me, I'm not sure if you heard of Kathy Woods. No, she's also, well, she's considered an investment queen. She's incredible. I'm very inspired by her and her thoughts, but she almost doesn't talk about the plant-based sector at all, or actually I haven't heard her talk about it at all, which does really surprise me, because I see this as probably the most important sector, or the most important sector when it comes to investing for the future, both not only for a sustainability perspective, but actually from a gains perspective. If you want to make a lot of money in the future, I totally believe that's going to be in the plant-based sector. That, and of course, other sustainability areas.
Right. Well, there's a couple of
because the EV sector, like electrical car. No, go continue.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to just stick with the plant-based sector. I ride a bike, so I'm not, cars are important, but there's lots to talk about in the plant-based sector. And I think you're absolutely right that these people, they don't live the lifestyle. They don't really understand. They're not going to be planning to watch Seaspiracy like us vegans are. It's always the ones who already know what's going on that are willing to see what's going on, it seems like. So they don't understand that we're on the edge of extinction. Like the species is literally on the edge of extinction, and we need to do something fast. And so there's a couple of Facebook pages specifically for the Very Good Butchers, the Very Good Food Company, which is interesting. There's also a Facebook page for stock investors. And I've noticed that the chatter, there's definitely a difference in the chatter between people who are just investing in plant-based companies and vegans who are investing in plant-based companies. Like, we're in it for the long run. We find a good company. I think you're right. You got to do your research and find a good company that you can trust, and then just stick with it. And the market seems to go, it goes up and down and all over the place for whatever reason. But I think that they say that in the long run, you just stick with it. Is that fairly good advice?
Yeah, I mean, that is, it's kind of like what some of the best advice out there is that you can't time the market, but it's about time in the market. So you can't, so timing the market, like, like, should I sell now? Is it high enough? I should sell now, and then let it go fall down again, and then I'll re-enter the stock again, and then trying to, time the market, and then when you can sell at highs and buy it at lows, right? And that's super dangerous in the long run. I did that in the beginning, try those kind of things. That I think it's a simple mistake for a lot of investors to do, because you get greedy and you think that this should be their best strategy. But it's actually the other way around. If you go look at statistics, people who don't time the market, but they care about the time in the market, how long you have your money in the market, eventually, with most companies anyways, they will go up long term, right? They might have like very good food company right now, and they're bombed down again. It's still pretty high from where it was in June, of course, but it's gone down pretty much. I would say probably almost 50% when it was up to over $9 Canadian. Now it's around 4.5 to 5. So it's gone down quite a lot, but it's going to come back up there and way beyond. There's no doubt about that. But I think some of the most important things, except that keep them in there, in my opinion, is that, I have 5 rules that I look at. I've talked about that on my channel a couple of times. And the first one is, do the company have a grand vision, right? Do they have a vision for the future? And try to understand that vision. And the second one is, do they have a superior product? And I would say that the Very Good Butchers definitely have a superior product to some aspects, especially from a health perspective. Because even though it's not 100% whole food, it's much more of a whole foods approach compared to Beyond Meat, for instance, and several other plant-based companies out there. Same with Impossible Foods. So, and then the third one that I look at is that no matter how superior a product is, if no one is talking about it, if no one's raving about it, it doesn't really matter, right? Because no one is buying it. So it could be how good you want it to be. It's not going to help. Which, same again, we're maybe only talking about the Very Good Butchers here, but I mean, everything I've read on different forums and talked with different people, they're crazy about the product. They really love it's a great flavor. Might not mimic meat, but it's a great flavor in its own sense anyhow. So and a lot of people, when they want to start eating more plant-based, it doesn't mean necessarily it has to taste like meat, right?
No, and
So
after a while as a vegan, you don't want to taste that meat flavor too, right? So yeah.
And then the fourth aspect is, do they have an advantage? So do they have an advantage towards other companies? And it's the same thing here. The advantage I think they have is that they have a healthier aspect on it, but they're also moved into dairy alternatives. And there are not a lot of plant-based companies that are not that they have a meat alternative, but also dairy alternatives, and the whole restaurant business idea, which they're planning to open up in different parts of North America with time. So they have plenty of advantages in that way. And then the last aspect is, do they have a strong CEO and a good management team? And I think if we've seen anything, is that, I mean, I still don't get this from Mitchell Scott. I mean, the interviews I've seen on him, he's quite relaxed, right? He's not like an Elon Musk or Jack Dorsey from Square, like, that you feel that kind of energy as of yet. I mean, he's still pretty new in the whole CEO business, if comparatively, but you can see that he really believes in what he's doing, and I think action speaks louder than words, right? So the management teams and the different boards that he's been building up now for almost a year kind of proves what kind of CEO he is, right? So the result speaks for itself. It's picking out people from Amazon, from Daya. I'm sure you've heard of Daya, which was also a Canadian company before, and now getting other like really strong players from the food sector and the plant-based food sectors, and they're all coming to the very good butchers at the moment, which kind of tells you something about him and his strategy. Obviously, I'm not saying he's making all these plans himself. He probably has some really good advisors and the whole overall management team. But yeah, so those 5 aspects, if you can do those, I think you can get really far in the stock market. So I'm not talking it has to be 100% the plant-based companies. Then it could be, you know, EVs or stuff like that. But especially for me, that's been true when it comes to plant-based stocks.
That's a good list of things to check on. I want to ask you about Oatly, because I think that's kind of your success story, right? In Sweden.
Yep.
And it's getting big name attachment, which may or may not be a good thing, I guess. But what's the story with Oatly? Have you, and I guess you've tasted, have you tasted the Very Good Butcher's foods yet? No?
No, I'm actually planning to order now because there's a Swedish person in the investor group on Facebook that I think a week or 2 weeks actually got, he bought like 10 kilos of product. What's that, like 20 pounds or something like that?
Wow.
Yeah, so I was like, whoa, you could order that to Sweden? And he said, yeah, it took like 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm actually planning to do that soon, and maybe make some videos on taste reviews and things like that.
Cool.
So it'd be weird if I didn't do it, considering how much I've been talking about them.
It's a good idea to taste the product. Yeah.
No, but Oatly, I've had their products for years because they've been here, I think, for about 10 years, something like that, in Sweden. And funnily enough, I know someone who knows the CEO, but yeah, I have no relation ways of contacting them at the moment, anyways. But and the main factory in Sweden, anyways, where the headquarters is, I would say about 30 kilometers from me. So not that far away, and they're doing really well internationally. But I do know that they've gotten, you maybe know that they're about to IPO soon. Well,
Yeah, so, and for people who don't understand, what is that IPO? What is that?
yeah, that's when a company like Oatly that is private right now, which means that they basically own the company themselves, even though they have some investors that are part of them now that have heavily invested in them, about $200 million, which is Oprah Winfrey and JC, and I think Natalie Portman, who is also vegan, right? I think Natalie Portman is.
Yeah, I don't think Oprah is she? I don't think Oprah is.
She has stated at times, I remember on her show, that she would never eat meat again, but I don't know how true that is at the moment. But
yeah, that was a long time ago. That was with Howard Lyman. They got sued and everything over that. Yeah.
And that's actually something Dr. Greger went in to help, because she was sued. When she was sued, Dr. Greger had to come in there and I think testify. Was it in Congress or something like that?
Right. Yeah, it was a big deal. Yeah, but I think Jay-Z and Natalie Portman definitely are vegan, aren't they? Beyonce's vegan.
So.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so they're part of that too. And I think it's called, is it the Blackstone Group or blah? Yeah. And that's been something very negative here in Sweden, though, that this group, anyways, that's gone in and invested in Oatly. I don't actually have the details, but it is something about that's been some shady business that they've done in the past. This business organization or this investment bank, and so Oatly has kind of like, there's been some hardcore vegans here in Sweden that just stopped buying Oatly then for a while, anyways.
Oh, wow.
So So yeah, that's why I normally say, if vegans aren't happy about you, you know that you need to change your ways, because same. That's why I always say that the very good butchers, they get really good reviews from vegans themselves, not only meat eaters or omnivores. But so that's why I really feel good about the very good butchers.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean they met at a family barbecue, right? And James happened to bring one of his burgers and Mitchell tasted it and he was this marketing guy and it all kind of grew from there. It's very grassroots. It's very cool. And I don't want him to turn into Elon Musk, quite frankly. I like that they're very community minded and I hope they can set a new standard for what a company can be, quite frankly. I know they've got plans to open production facilities really soon though, right? To expand their range.
Yeah, they're actually opening one now in Vancouver, the Rupert facility, which is going to expand their production capacity with about 30 times, which is huge. Which is really great considering that their products is really in demand, right? They haven't been able to fill their demand in over a year.
Since day one, since the day they opened, they've been trying to keep up with demand, which, as Mitchell has said, it's not a bad problem to have, right?
It's very good problem to have. And then later this, I think in Q2, Q3, something like that, the beginning of summer, they've talked about several times anyways that they're going to open up an even larger facility in the US, the Patterson facility in California. So which is going to be, yeah, extremely huge when it comes to even like 3 times bigger than the Rupert facility. I mean, when it's at its max production capacity, of course. So so they're doing really well.
They are. It's wonderful. So, okay, so we've got Very, and then we're going to look at Oatly. But so, okay, here's a question then. There's all these different stock markets, and you were saying that the stock market actually goes back like thousands of years, this concept of this somehow. But just for our purposes today, since we're kind of getting to the end of our time, what? Like, there's so many different stock markets. Like the Very Good Butchers started out on the CSE, and then now they've changed to a different one, and so even if I wanted to invest in Oatly, like how do I know even where to find it? It seems very
Yeah,
confusing.
Oatly, like we talked about, they haven't IPO'd yet, which IPO means that they're basically not public. They're opening up for the public, so ordinary retailers like you and me could invest in them, and they're probably going to do that within the next couple of months. So that's really, the IPO process is a really large process that takes usually between 4 to 6 months, and it costs a lot of money involving different lawyers and different banks and investment groups. So it's a really really long, yeah, long period of time, and but when they are do IPO, that means that you and I can go in and invest in their stock. And when it comes to the Very Good food company, yeah, like you said, they were in the CSE, which was a really small stock exchange, and now they've become uplisted, like I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, to something called the TSXV, which is in Toronto.
Toronto, okay.
Yeah, so which is a kind of like a little larger listing, larger stock exchange, but still not one of the biggest ones, though. Which basically means this is actually very positive news. That means that the company is going to get a lot more exposure now. More people are going to find out about it. And that's what we want, of course, if we're investing in them, because if people start investing in them even more, yeah, that will make the stock price go up, and they'll get more capital that they can use in their ongoing expansion. And then the next step after that is actually called just the TSX, which will be even larger. And then the last step is to get them into NASDAQ on Wall Street then. And that's when you get skeptical, I guess.
But then Wall Street crashes. Like, I don't don't know. I kind of want to move away from Wall Street. I think that whole Wall Street thing is really tenable. It continues to require billions of dollars of money injected from the U.S. government. You know, they're starving their people, but they're
Yeah.
bailing out Wall Street constantly. So why, you know, and so are there other stock markets around the world? Like, does Sweden have a stock market?
Yeah, we have an equivalent of Nasdaq. We have Stockholm's our capital, Stockholm Nasdaq. So we have our stock exchanges too, but usually I would say in the Western world, a lot of the stock exchanges in the different countries are still kind of like interconnected or dependent on Wall Street. So today, considering that we're a global world, right? We can't like do one thing in a corner and that won't affect the rest of the world. So that's how it works today. That's both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on what's happening, right?
And I guess one thing is that, you know, it's so different now than even 20 years ago. We all have our personal computers and we can all go online and we can all do our own investing. We don't have to go through a broker, and we can watch things and track them. And so it's really a different world for investors now.
Yeah, I would say that's actually, that could be detrimental because, you know, even though I'm a YouTuber and I talk about investment and investment philosophies, I still don't believe that we should only listen to YouTubers, obviously, because that's why I always say that you have to do your own due diligence. You have to invest safe, and you have to really look into the numbers yourself, right? And look into the company and try to understand the financials, you know, their cash balance. And that's really important, because if you only listen to a popular YouTuber and you go, you know, because everyone to some extent, whether we like it or not, I mean, always as a historian, I always try to be impartial, you know, and not being partial at all. But I have also learned that that's basically impossible, right? So that's why it's important, you know, to, you know, go in, look at the papers, look at the information yourself, and build yourself a picture that you feel comfortable with. And being inspired by some people, then that's okay. But don't let that be your only source of information or your only source to begin with, because that could be really dangerous, I think.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's gambling, basically. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, this is lovely. And before we go, I'm just curious to know what kind of supports the communist Swedish government, that's not so communist anymore. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, people hear the word communist, they think of Stalin, right? But the things have changed and morphed and taken their own shape. And different countries do different kinds of socialist things. In Canada, we had some support from our federal government, and now they're talking about a universal basic income as a result of what they saw people do with the money that we had, which is great. The U.S. has had very, very little support, if any at all. They have no medical system. It's really exposing what raw capitalism does to people.
And Obamacare was basically destroyed directly by Trump, wasn't it?
Well, and Obamacare it was not available to everybody to begin with. So it was an imperfect system to begin with. And then now a lot of people have lost their jobs as a result of COVID. So they've lost their insurance because their health insurance is tied to their jobs. This is what capitalism without compassion does, right? But you and I are lucky we live in countries with some form of medical care. And I'm just wondering what kind of supports did you get from your government through all of this?
Um, well, actually, I would say that we've had problems here too, of course, and we were one of the few countries in the world that we didn't shut down very much to begin with. We had a whole another philosophy in Sweden, and I know the U.S. has been talking about us as a scary example, and a lot of other European countries shut down, like they shut down their schools, a lot of the stores and companies. But here, we really didn't do that. We've had small times where we've shut down the upper secondary school, which is the equivalent of our later years in high school, you know, between 16 to 19. But then we're opening it up again. But most of our elementary school or school years from 1 to 9, that hasn't actually shut down at all. We've had small periods there for 1 or 2 weeks, but the government here is really adamant of not shutting that down, the schools, because they're really worried about the personnel, like the police, the doctors, the nurses, the people who get, the whole society going when people need help in these situations. What happens to their kids if the schools shut down? So it's been a really different path here, and yeah, I'm not 100% sure what to feel about it. Being a teacher myself, I've been forced this whole year to work with all the students. I meet hundreds of kids every day. The teachers have basically been like, to some extent, like the first guard, So like, even though there have been different groups that have been able to quite a lot of groups that have been able to work from home, private companies and things like that, but teachers, no. But they've given out some form of aid, financial aid, to both larger companies and smaller companies. But the whole media presence here have been talking about that. It seems like it's still kind of like the US, I guess, that it's still the really larger corporations that get, the most of the money. There's reasons and excuses why that is. We have a lot of smaller restaurants that basically had to shut down. But they've been trying to support them, giving them money. And if you have to be homesick, normally in Sweden, the first day you're home, you don't get any cash at all. But the other days you get like 80% of your pay. But during this period, you actually got money even on the first day. And it's still applied right now. So there are small changes like that they've tried to help. They have put a lot of billions and billions of Swedish crowns, which is our monetary system is Swedish crowns, right? They have put a lot of billions and billions to try to help both ordinary people and companies. So, but nothing like that they were putting out like $1,400 to every family in that way. But I think that is because we don't really need it. Because in our system, it's not a perfect system, far from it. But in our system, people are usually guaranteed some form, if they lose their job, and even if they haven't saved or anything, or they don't have any, most people have some form of insurance, so they'll get money for a year or 2 years, like 80% or 90% of their pay. But if they haven't had that, they don't have any money at all. Normally, most people here will still get some kind of minimal money from the government. So that's part of our social welfare.
And what's the homeless situation like in Sweden? A lot of homeless people?
Well, I would say what I know, like I'm not from the US or anything, or I'm not sure how it is in Canada.
Well, and you're in a smaller town, I think, too, aren't you?
Me personally, I live in a village. It's
a
like
village, okay.
we're 3,000 people here,
Wow.
but I come from the third largest city in Sweden, which isn't large comparatively to, it's like 350,000 people. But fortunately, I would say the last 20 years, we're seeing more and more homeless people here as well.
Wow.
But that's also, we usually talk about here that everyone has the right to get some kind of social welfare, but it's dependent on drugs and alcohol issues. But it also, we've had problems with, like, if you aren't registered at an apartment or a home, then you're not usually allowed. You're not able to get money from the system. Right. It's kind of like a conundrum how to make that work. So that's become worse in Sweden, even though I know we probably have it way better than a lot of countries out there. Even our social welfare system is getting actually worse and worse.
Really unfortunate, because it's way more expensive to have homeless people, because it's expensive in terms of healthcare and policing and all the rest of it. What about rents? Like, so if a person has to be attached to a housing unit to be able to jump through the hoops to get the aid, what is the rental situation like?
Yeah, like, well, then usually, like, if you don't have enough money, depending on the situation, normally you will get some form of social welfare there. That it will give you like a minimal amount of money. Not like if you're living in a 5-room flat alone, right? But if you have a situation that's applicable to your situation, then they'll pay for your rent, and then like a minimum what you could, for paying your most important bills and to be able to buy food.
Right. Okay.
So and comparatively, that's still great, what I understand. But
That's nice. So there are some supports then. That's great. And what has it been like in the schools? Have you had any outbreaks in the school that you're in?
Rona, as we call it in the YouTube.
Rona?
Yeah, we don't use the other word because YouTube apparently they're not happy about people using that word, especially if you want to have a channel that gets supported financially with time. I'm not there yet.
YouTube is going a little bit crazy with all its censorship. A lot of YouTubers are being shut down and demonetized in the States, especially. Wow.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons is that you won't be able to monetize either your channel or I think specifically that video if you use that word.
Rona. Okay. So, but you've been safe then. You're feeling safe, and the kids are moving into a new way of being in terms of space and that sort of thing.
It's really hard for the kids because today's generation, especially kids that's between 10 to 16, they have we're not used to this at all. I mean, we haven't had a war in Sweden for 207 years. So 1814 was the last war we had with Norway when we took over Norway. So we haven't had that issue. We weren't really part of the world wars. We were part of it in a negative way, in a way we shouldn't have been, but that's probably another story. But we weren't inflicted like with our factories being destroyed or anything like that. And we haven't had starvation and famines like that in long time in Sweden. So when this situation actually happened, I think people are still confused because we could see a lot of other countries like Italy and Spain and France, Germany, they shut down and they took it super serious because they've seen a lot of wars and more famine and these pandemics and stuff like that. But Sweden, we've been spared up here, right in the north. So a lot of people here, they don't, to some extent, I would say it seems like a lot of people in Sweden don't take it serious because if you haven't had these kind of things before, you don't know what's at stake, basically, because we've always had, most of us, not everyone, but most of us have had it really well. So I'm not sure about how you guys in Canada. I have some close friends that are Canadians, and my understanding is that you guys have been way more serious about this. I have a friend that travels between Sweden and Canada, Vancouver especially, and he says every time he comes back to his family in Vancouver, he has to sit in quarantine for 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Yeah. They have. Well, in different parts of the country are handling it differently as well. You said you have a friend in Montreal. I know they got hit real hard. And then there's been some federal support. The federal government has done certain things like paying, helping small businesses pay rents and paying their staff a portion of their wages. So luckily, a lot of small businesses are still in existence. Some have gone away, but because of these supports, a lot of them have survived. Whereas in the US, what I'm hearing is that there's no support for small businesses, and the Walmarts and Amazon are just taking over everything. It's just becoming corporatized. It's horrifying. So there's been that sort of federally, and then a certain amount of, they've extended.
I don't, when it comes to the US. When it comes to the US, I mean, I only hear what I hear in Swedish news and what some people like, some investment channels talks about what's going on in the US financially. So I actually don't know that much in detail.
Yeah, there's some good independent YouTubers who are really covering it on the streets, but they're getting shut down. So it's really scary, you know. The UK's got this crazy censorship thing going on now. And so anyways, yeah, Canada, we've done pretty well. And then provincially, each province has kind of handled it differently. But I think there's definitely a difference in attitude as well, having you know, a universal healthcare system that we're all a part of, we all care about each other's health, is also different than having a for-profit healthcare system. So it's really interesting, I think, to see suddenly we're very different. You know, there's kind of a joke in Canada that what's really the difference between Canada and the US? Well, now we're seeing what that difference is, right?
Yeah, actually, it's since my oldest friend is Canadian, he actually lives in Sweden now, Richard Smith, and I've heard the stories about Canada from him since I was like 14, and then everything I've read about. Actually, Vancouver has always been like the dream city for me to move to in the future. So and considering that it's been like that for 30 years, and then now when I'm doing my investment channel, the most companies that I do cover seem to be from Vancouver. It's really, yeah, it's funny life like that, right? But you do seem to have everything I've read, anyways. You do seem to have a really good supportive system for your population comparatively to others. I'm sure you have your issues as well, but the picture I've gotten might be sensitive now, but regarding Justin Trudeau is that he seems to be a person that cares about the population. So I don't know. It's like
Yeah. I mean, we could probably talk another hour about all the intricacies of that. It depends who you talk to, if you're rich or poor or an environmentalist or a, you know, there's good and bad everywhere, right? And I would like us, we tend to compare ourselves to the US, which is a really low bar, you know. I mean, at this point, I think we should compare ourselves to Norway, Sweden, Finland. You got like there's more kind of socialist ideas going on there, right? And I don't know if you follow, there's a guy on YouTube. We're way over time, but I'll just leave this up on YouTube. There's a guy on YouTube named Richard Wolf. So he's not an investor, but he's a financial he's an economist, and he studied at Harvard. And his thing is, you know, at Harvard, when you studied economy or economics, you studied capitalism. That's what you studied. You didn't study any alternative. There was no mention of Karl Marx. There was no mention of socialism or how it's evolving. And whenever they talked about socialism or communism, it was always Stalin and Hitler and, you know, and all these crazy things. But in fact, there's different manifestations of socialism, and he talks a lot about worker co-ops. And so he's a very interesting guy on YouTube. Yeah, he's an older kind of gentleman scholar.
I recognize his name, but that's the thing with all kind of ideology is that they're not isolated. It's like even if North America and the U.S. has a form of capitalistic system and liberalism to some extent, we can still see aspects of socialism there. And it's the same thing in Sweden. I would say that, yeah, we've had a long history of socialism here, but capitalism, the ideas have still been there in different aspects of the society. And actually, we were renowned for many years in Sweden that we had a system that was, when it comes to the finances, that was both capitalistic and socialistic, like kind of 50-50. Like some aspects of society, the government control the finances, and other aspects, the companies and the markets control it. So that, but we had to have some kind of governmental control, not to let the markets go totally crazy on their own. And it's been working really well for us for, I think, 30, 40 years. But the last, I would say 10 to 20 years, the markets are taking over here more and more now. So we are really much more capitalistic than many people think here in Sweden.
All right. Well, okay. Well, I'm going to wrap this up and say thank you so much for taking this time and telling us all about this. So your channel is PlantStock on YouTube, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And so you take care, Jesse.
Thank you. I hope to talk to you again.
All right. Sounds good.